As you said, like, we really believe books are the most undervalued commodity on the planet. It's absolutely bizarre that someone can put their whole life's work into one volume, and you can access it for $30. It's quite bizarre. So once you really get the impacts of that, then you can really get sold on it and try and inject it into your daily routine.
In 1837, Horace Mann created the education system, a system at the time designed to pump out factory workers and professors. The same system that is still being used today in the 21st century. Now, Mann's system is backfiring. We are being moulded by the same industrial system that has existed for close to 200 years. That system delivers us into a digital economy that has no need of our outdated skills. This isn't our teachers' fault. This isn't the government's fault. This is due to a rapidly changing world full of technology and unforeseen circumstances. And us Gen Zs are caught in the middle. Welcome to the Driven Young podcast, the podcast for stressed, overwhelmed young Australians, teaching you practical life skills you can implement now to set yourself up in life. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast, and today I'm joined by two Aussie blokes, Adam and Adam, or better known as Ashton and Jonesy. A few months ago I received an email from these guys asking if they could send me a free copy of their new book before it got released to the public. I sent them my address, and a few days later I received a massive yellow book called The Shit They Never Taught You. I didn't plan on reading it straight away, but I read a few pages which turned into 20, 30, 50, 100, and a week later I had finished the entire book and used 30 sticky notes to mark out my favourite parts. So who are these two guys? Well, they have a podcast called What Will You Learn? And here is their story in their own words. The best bits from the best books. That's what we deliver with the show, each and every week. We read a great non-fiction book and we share the biggest lessons on our podcast. We started the show back in June 2016 with 4 listeners, Ashton, Jonesy, and our mums. We really didn't know what we were doing, but we just decided to hit record, then 20 minutes later, we hit stop and uploaded it to share with the world. We learned as we went, getting better each episode, making gradual improvements over time. Today, we're spending somewhere in the realm of a combined 25 to 30 hours for every episode. Reading, dissecting, taking notes, making episode plans, recording, editing, writing blog posts, publishing, and sharing. For two simple blokes who met while behind the bar at a pub, we've been able to build an audience that listens to what we have to say, and we've met and interviewed some of our favourite authors of all time. And that is what has led them to create their own book. In this episode, we talk about all things books and learnings. I often get asked, what books do I recommend? Well, this is an entire episode dedicated to that, featuring guys who have read a lot more books than me. If you're struggling to read books, this will be a great episode for you. If you're looking for which books to read, this will also be a great episode for you. It's worth noting that I've collected all the books the boys recommend in this episode and put them into a PDF document for you with links on where to buy them so you don't have to. So if you find yourself worrying about remembering the books I mentioned throughout the episode, just click the link in the show notes and download the PDF. I also highly recommend you get a copy of the boys' book. It is a massive hardcover book. In my opinion, this is the best book out there. It's easy to read, it's condensed, and covers so many great topics, hence why I'm so stoked to have them on the show. As per usual, please DM me on Instagram. I love getting your messages, and DM the boys if you want to connect with them. The free PDF with the book recommendations and all the other links will be in the show notes below. And keep in mind, my book is coming out, and you can pre-order that for only $7 for a limited time only. Now, over to Ashton and Jonesy. Ashton and Jonesy, welcome so much to the podcast.
Mate, thanks so much for having us. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, I've been really excited for this episode just because I think what we're talking about is so relevant. And I don't know how long ago it was, 2 months ago, you sent me a copy of your book, which is I've got right here. Put lots of notes into it.
Oh, yeah, damn, look at that.
So, yeah, I went through that. I read through that really quickly, and it's just a phenomenal book. So you've just launched it. It's, I guess, a summary of like your favorite personal development books.
Yeah, 115 of what we reckon are the best books of all time that have had a massive impact on us across a whole bunch of different categories. You know, personal development, career, business, marketing, bit of philosophy, everything in between.
Yeah, it's absolutely our jam is, well, on our podcast, we go through the best bits of the best books. We've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now, quite a long time. So we have read a whole bunch of books, done a whole bunch of notes, and try to put it all in the one place.
Yeah, it's so good because surprisingly a lot I get asked what books do I recommend to people. And to be honest, I read mainly fiction now. I feel like I go through a phase of personal development. I'm like, I just need to start doing and stop learning. But the book I always usually recommend is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's just such a generic book that that kind of suits any type of person. It's like communication skills are going to help be beneficial to anyone. It doesn't matter what career you're going into. But now it's kind of like this one as well, like, because it's just it covers so many bases. You mentioned money and finance, philosophy. There's so many great stories as well. Like I've marked a lot of the stories, which I'm starting to use in my presentations. So I'm just like, oh, what was that story? Like there's one, smelling the roses. I love how you talk about that. And there's other stories in there, like the conscious and the subconscious mind and the elephant. But there's lots of gold in there. But I guess before we get into, what's more in the book, like how did it all start? You mentioned you've got a podcast where you interview authors and you talk between you guys analyzing personal development books. How did that start, and why did you get into, reading books?
Started a long time ago. So for me and Ashton, we both worked at a pub together, probably going back 10 years now, quite a long time. And that's when we first met. So it was my last shift before I went overseas was Ashton's first shift. I'm sure you got an Australian audience. There might be a few who actually know the pub and had a few beers there. So it's the Tudor Inn in Cheltenham. And so we touched base then, but then a few years later, we were both at university. I was studying engineering. Ashton was studying commerce and finance. And there was actually the book you mentioned before. I was reading How to Win Friends and Influence People at the pub. I had a beer in the other hand. And then, of course, it was Ashton's number one favorite book at the time. So obviously came up to me and we said, hey, mate, we worked at the pub together. And then from there, we really hit it off. And we had a similar conversation about books ongoing for a long time. And we both loved listening to podcasts. So we thought, why not go out and actually start a podcast on books and just having our discussions and just recording them. And this is really where it started. And then beyond there, we've really iterated and tried to evolve and change things up as we've gone along. And it's where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, amazing. And because I guess something I wanted to talk about was, before we get into the meat of it, was just like, did you struggle to read books? Have you been reading books your entire life? Or was there a bit of like, oh, I'm not a book reader, I won't bother? And is that something you had to get over? Like, what was the story when it came to reading books for you guys?
I was definitely maths at school. I was definitely not English at school. I hated that we got prescribed, here's the 3 books you need to read and then write essays on. And I didn't really understand the type of kid who was like pulling out all these different bits from the books and like talking about how this character in this book actually relates to some deep subconscious need for whatever. It just didn't make any sense to me. I was like, okay, what's the answer? What's the maths? What's the black and white? What's the tick or cross? Not like, what's the subjective interpretation of this? So I really struggled with English at school, and honestly, I think it was the type of books as well. Like the books that you read in school are so bizarre that surely they can pick some better ones for us to do. So I really didn't read. After high school, I thought, no, that's it. I don't have to read books anymore, so I'm not really going to read books at all. And it wasn't until I started listening to podcasts that, like, on every podcast interview with all these mega successful people, whether they were CEOs or billionaires or whoever they were, they all like credited books. Like, oh, I read this book and I learned this one thing and it changed my career, or I read this one book and learned this one thing and it changed my personal relationships with people. It's like there was all these successful people that were crediting books for all of their biggest successes. So I thought, well, why the hell aren't I reading? And that's when I started trying to pick up some books and try to start reading again.
It's almost, I see that as well. Like, you listen to any podcast, any successful person, they all seem to attribute books to being a big part of, where they got to where they are. And that's why I push it on young people. It's like, all it takes is one book or one section of a book that can shift your entire mindset, and it can potentially change your life. What about you? Were you the same? Did you struggle to read books?
Yeah, I wasn't much of a reader at all. I was really sold on reading just through the first non-fiction book that had a big impact on my life. I was probably skeptical that you could get much value out of the books, and it was just one that was I was a pack-a-day smoker, party animal, took a lot of party drugs, just scraping by at university, wasn't getting that far. And it was one book, Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking, cost $30, took me 8 hours to read, and lo and behold, the return on investment was like millions of dollars of cash in the pocket from money not spent, and also the health benefits. So after that, I was just literally just blown away. I'm like, how can one piece of text give me a return on investment like that? And since then, I just went on a hardcore reading journey from that, and just really replaced the destructive habit with a positive one. And as you said, like, we really believe books are the most undervalued commodity on the planet. It's absolutely bizarre that someone can put their whole life's work into one volume, and you can access it for $30. It's quite bizarre. So once you really get the impacts of that, then you can really get sold on it and try and inject it into your daily routine.
It is insane. Like, even I've been listening to a book called The Short History of Everything. And it's kind of just like, it's a short history. Yeah, that's it. It's a short history of everything. Yeah. The name's in the title. But he talks about like a concept of this guy who tried to figure out how far a degree on Earth is. So how do you measure a degree? And it's like 1.7 point something kilometers. But it took him like 2 years of walking across England and measuring every single step. And then all we have to do is Google, what is a degree? And we've got it like that. And it's the same with books. Like, we're talking decades and decades of experience put into 8 hours or whatever, as you mentioned, and we can get access to it for like $20 to $30, probably free if we really looked hard enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the amount of benefit you can get from it. Obviously, for Jonesy, it was like one book that helps you quit smoking. The return on that is just incredible. But then, like, every book is going to have a nugget, maybe not quite that big, but pretty close as well. And whether it was just, one thing that improves your communication, or one thing that improves your public speaking skills, or, one thing that improves your marketing pitch. Like, if you can just take one thing out of a book, it's so worth that $20 or $30, or even more worth it if you just pinch it for free.
Well, take that one you were talking before, Byron, that how to win friends and influence people. I think every week I'll come across someone who is just needs to read that bloody book, and and if you buy it for them and give it to them, it's probably going to be offensive, and they're never going to read it. But a lot of people out there are just one book away from changing their lives, really, and it could unlock a whole potential new business they're doing, or how they're perceived at work. They're all of a sudden not perceived as arseholes from just being so selfish. So I think that's the most common book as well that everyone needs to read. So I do like your recommendation. I'm so proud that our books are part of that list as well.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I mean, how to win friends and influence people is such a big one. I mean, to even drive another point home, in that book, there's a story. One of the sections is just smiling, the importance of learning to just smile. And the story is an older guy who runs a business, and he never smiles. And then that one shift changed his entire life. He started smiling, and his entire life improved. So it's like, if all you did was read that book and you got nothing out of it, but you learned to smile, and maybe that improves your entire life. Like, that's just an example of how, like, only one thing needs to click, or one thing needs to land, and you've done well. You've got your return on investment.
Oh, massive, man, massive. And it goes for every area of life. Obviously, career and business are the obvious ones, but it goes way beyond that as well.
Yeah, there's books on everything. And the other reason I was excited to talk to you guys is because I don't know how big you are in the personal development world. Sounds like you know it pretty well. But I guess that's a world I'm kind of going into and I'm becoming. And I know it's pretty scammy and pretty dodgy and also quite cringy at times. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, just read books, it'll change your life. And it's like, oh, shut up. Like, I get it. Everyone says that. But for me, you guys are like just everyday blokes, and, you still have fun. You've still got jobs. You still do everything. And here you are recommending books, not on like you're not trying to sell us a course or make any money. And I think that's quite powerful. I'm not sure if you guys agree.
I'd say we're very much like yourself, had that similar kind of feeling about personal development, because in one sense it's so important. It's so important, but it's been so tainted by a lot of people and the whole industry and the whole genre and everything. It's so wanky. And there's just and people just get caught up in personal development traps. It can be an absolute trap where you just go into the same seminars and you sort of get addicted to the feeling that you're improving, and you're really just running on a hamster wheel almost, and not getting anywhere. So 100% connect with you on that. That just bring it ground to earth. There is some practical and pragmatic things that you can take from personal development and books, rather than just, we call it like a intellectual kind of masturbation, where you're just constantly reading and feeling like you're doing something, but you're really not doing anything.
And that was a big thing. I felt like I've done the same with podcasts as well. It's like you hop in a car and you feel like you have to be listening and learning at every point instead of just relaxing. Same with reading. It's like, I shouldn't be doing this. I could be reading instead. Well, there's nothing wrong with playing PlayStation at night to wind down or something. And so I think it's just finding that balance.
Big time, man. Yeah, big time. I think the biggest part is the masturbation element. not in the intellectual sense, that you feel like you're getting somewhere. You feel like you're learning, but the biggest part of it is probably the part that you're missing is actually putting it into action. As you say, if you spend so
Yeah.
much time reading and learning, you're not spending anywhere near enough time actually doing. So you need to take
Mm.
the first half of the equation is to read and learn. It's you're going to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of mistakes, a lot of setbacks. You can find a few shortcuts. That's all going to be done through reading. But then the big half of the equation is actually putting it into practice, putting it into the real world. So not just learning, but actually doing as well.
Yeah. Well, the example I use, and I'm sure you've read this book, Atomic Habits, which is like, I wonder, over 1 million copies sold. I wonder how many people have read that and then never changed their habits.
I'd
It's
say
like,
probably
including me.
slightly under 1 million. Like if 1 million people
Yeah,
bought it,
yeah,
probably
yeah.
999,000 and maybe 950 or so probably have done nothing about it.
And you're right,
Exactly.
Byron. You said you didn't necessarily change too much after it. You just mentioned, I think, and yeah, it's the same. Like there's still books like you read, especially when you've read to the point where you've read hundreds of books. I guess that if you read that as your first one, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, whatever it might be that much of a slap across your face that you have a huge change. But yeah, it's very easy to fall in the trap of just, like we were saying, you're just reading, and then you're actually not applying stuff. So yeah, having the balance is critical, eh?
Yeah, it's so important. And do you find, you guys, do you do a weekly podcast? Yeah.
Yep,
And so is that a new
so-
book every week, or is it a bit of a conversation around a few different things?
Yeah, new book every week. A lot of reading.
So you,
yeah.
Well,
I was about to say, how do you find time to fit all that in?
Yeah, I think it was a challenge at first, that's for sure. We'd set out with the goal of doing a book every week, and the first one we did like an 80-page book, and that was fine. The next week we did like a 90-page book, that was fine. The week after that, we stepped up to like a 200-page book, and it took us 3 weeks to read it and be ready to do it. So we had to like try to find things to fill the gaps. Like we went to a personal development event and did like an episode on that. We did a documentary, did a Disney movie, did episodes on those to fill some of the gaps. But eventually, just I guess over time, we built up. We built up the cadence, we built up the consistency, we read more often, and slowly we got there. Slowly we got to the point where we're reading a book a week, and a 550-page book we can read in a week now and do an episode on. So a lot of it was building those habits, building those routines, and it was a bit of a struggle at first, but now we're probably reading 70 books a year, and only 50 of them get on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
If you think of Charles Duhigg's Power of Habit, with the cue craving reward, and how important it is to have the reward to build habits, I think after you've read so much and you're actually changing some things, you probably will get the reward part of the equation. So your brain has that dump of euphoria a bit earlier in the process. So whilst you're reading, you actually have the euphoria. I think our reward was also a bit of, in doing a podcast about books, we look at the downloads, and then if we saw people were looking at it, like you get your little dopamine hit from your Facebook likes and comments. We probably had that from looking at our downloads after reading. So I think the actual science behind habits was also linked to our habit building of reading. And now, it's 70 books a year without effort. I think sometimes it's hard not to read, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just want to play PlayStation or just chill out, watch Netflix, go for a walk, do something else. It probably got to the point now where it's hard not to always be reading.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it is a really good problem to have. Like, and I will ask, what book recommendations you have. We'll go through your favorite books and stuff. Before I get to that, kind of juicy stuff, I would love to know your thoughts. Don't know how often you talk with people about books. I imagine it's a lot, but like, do you find if you like read halfway through a book and you go, does it ever feel like a chore? And you go, if it feels like a chore, should you just swap and pick a new book, or should you push through it? Like, what advice would you have on that?
If you had have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, no, you got to push through. I'd like the completionist approach. I couldn't mentally be honest with myself and say, hey, I read this book if I'd only read half the book. So for me, to get the benefits of having the feeling of reading the book, I would say you got to read it all the way through to the end. Now, thankfully, I've changed a bit. And now if it's a stinker of a book, I'm willing to give it the chop. I can get a quarter of the way through and say, no, this is not going anywhere. I'm not intrigued. I'm not hooked. I'm not inspired. I'm not engaged. And I can put it down and move on to something else. And I think just knowing that, like, I use the app Goodreads, where you add the books that you want to read, as well as the books you're currently reading, as well as the books that you finished. Like I've read 350 books, but there's another over 1,000 books that I want to read. And just knowing that there are so many books out there that I could read instead, and there's probably 300 sitting on my shelf that I've bought that I haven't read yet. Just knowing that there's so many other avenues, other books I can try, rather than just spending another 2-3 days on wasting that on a crappy book.
It's like what's the opportunity cost of this book? A better book.
And also probably then like it probably crushes your motivation as well. So it's probably not even the time of not even the time wasted on that you could use reading another book. It's probably then like you probably lose 10% interest in reading books altogether.
Because like I've only read half of 4 Hour Work Week. I don't know why. I just found it got really dry, and I always reference it, and I always say, "Oh yeah, I've read that book," and I'm like, "I've only read half. I've got enough out of it. I got enough out of it that I can like got all the important parts, but it just felt really repetitive, and it's huge. It's like massive.
It's thick, yeah.
Was that one of the first ones you read, Byron, or was it later down the track?
Oh, it was early, not one of the first, but it was probably first 20, probably like late, almost around probably 15, 16, 17. I don't actually read that much. I think because I have the podcast, my whole thing is personal development and stuff. I think everyone assumes I read, but like, as I mentioned, the book I'm reading right now is fictional. Actually, I read a lot. I just don't read much personal development. But I find these so easy to read and so enjoyable, and they're massive. Like, this is half the book. This is one of part one. So it's like, 1,400 pages, and then the letters are tiny. But I'll get through these faster than a 200-page book that I'm not that engaged with. Which is why I'm a big fan of your book, because it's just short, sharp. You can kind of pick it up and put it down whenever there's, it's so valuable.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested to hear from you, Byron, because I think our brains are pretty similar, Ashton and myself and you. So in the personal development space, quite specifically, how does fiction translate to personal development? Is it purely recreational, or is there something that actually helps and improves your life in a more less abstract sort of way?
It's a great question. I read it for enjoyment, and I read every morning. I don't know if you've heard me talk about the 5:30 Club. I can talk about that a bit later on, but I read every morning. So having a story is really great. But, fiction writers are really intelligent. Like the stuff, except books like this is a fantasy book. Some of the stories are incredible. And depends how open you are. If you're open to learning from them, you can learn so much from fictional books. Like, it's crazy. Even there's I've got these tabs in your book here. I've done that to a few fiction books where there's been a few points. I'm like, that was a great story. That was a great point. So I think there are a lot of benefits intellectually wise, and it does open up your mind to a new way of thinking and all these possibilities. It's just different.
Yeah, I like it. So interesting. Yeah, both of us haven't really gone too deep into fiction. The door's slightly open, but yeah, I'm still waiting to get sold on it to go hard on it. But
I mean, the thing is, you got to commit. Like this series I'm doing right now is like 12 books, so it's like 6 months.
Wow.
So it's just like, and they're big books as well. So yeah, I don't know, but that's the thing. I'll switch between them. I can read two books at one time. Like I'll jump between this one or other books. But I mean, we'll get into the fun stuff. What books do you recommend? Obviously, we spoke about how to win friends and influence people, but you guys have read 350 books ish.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've kind of lost track of something in that sort of realm. I think recommendations, there's all sorts of ways we can break it up into different categories, and obviously it's very context dependent on who the person is, what their goals are in life. But I think there's a few overarching ones that cover everyone in all contexts. But probably one way we can break it is your first book, and maybe a book, if someone's been reading a whole bunch and they're listening right now and they've done 100 books, and what's next? That's probably another way we can look at it. I think you can't go past 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a very cliche, very popular book. Contrarians probably won't like it because everyone else likes it, sort of thing. But if you look at the 7 Habits, you can't go past what they do if you actually apply them into your life. The first one being proactive rather than reactive. I think a lot of the population get trapped into being reactive, and all of a sudden with a victim mentality, you really don't have much power over your life. But once you realize that as a human, we've got the ability to choose, then everything changes from that. And then once you can be proactive, you can find out what your goals are and then try and find a way to do it. And that can really kick off your journey. All the habits beyond that are equally as powerful. And I think if you come back to it after reading it the first time, come back 6 months later, you might find that a different habit each time is more applicable to you. So that's one that I think if people haven't read it before and they're not much of a reader, I'd say that's an awesome place to start.
Yeah. And is it so you'd say like book number 1, if you're looking to get into, nonfiction books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is your recommendation?
I think mine would be, I think that's a must read. Probably the first 5 books. For me, number 1 would be probably The Compound Effect, or maybe The Slight Edge. Either one of those, the books are very, very similar. It's just the idea of how, if you want to change something to get to a big result, it's often the accumulation of really tiny changes, but done consistently over time. So I think that's probably one that sets the tone of just saying that, the small 1% change over time, once you compound that over 365 days, and then you compound that over 5 or 10 years, the results are going to be absolutely exponential. It's going to be enormous. So I think a book like either The Slight Edge or The Compound Effect sets the tone for developing almost like a reading habit. It's almost like a meta book to then get you into reading. And I think another early one that everyone should read is Mindset by Carol Dweck. Just the idea that the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. If you're coming in with a fixed mindset, thinking your skills are carved in stone, you're just born either good at it or not good at it, and nothing you can do is going to change it, then you're probably not going to really put in any effort to try to improve. But if you come in with the growth mindset, knowing that everything you do is going to benefit you, you're going to learn, you're going to improve, you're going to get better over time. You can get good at something. If you're not good at it now, through effort, applied effort, you can actually get good. I think that's pretty vital as well. So I'd say any of those 3 or 4 books that we rattled off are great places for someone starting off, especially a younger person early in their career.
Well, that's what I was about to say. This podcast is for younger people. I mean, as young as 14, average listener, I'm not too sure. I say 16 to 22. And I think you made that point earlier on. It's so important. You finish school and you go, all right, I'm free. I don't have to read again, because you associate reading as like something that's got negative associations as opposed to positive. And it almost feels like a chore. So I do think if we, and that's where the fixed and growth mindset comes in. Oh, I can't read. Well, you can read, you've just got to put it into work. It might be hard for the first time. And so maybe starting off with a book, as you mentioned, like compounding, what was it called? The Compound Effect and The Slight Edge. And that's what he talks about in Atomic Habits as well. Like, how do you achieve a goal? It's just a habit compounded over time. And I think, isn't podcasting a perfect example of that? You slowly see your listeners go up. You slowly, it's every week got to put in the work, and eventually you start to see the results.
Yeah, well, compound interest, it's everywhere. It's not just in investing in money. It's also in relationships. It's also in reputation, also in skills, and going hard in an area. So I think for younger people, obviously getting the benefits of compound interest as early as possible. By the time you hit 25, 30 years old, then you're going to be so far ahead of what you could have been if you weren't benefiting from compound interest.
Well, so I teach at a company called Empower You. I think I might have mentioned it to you, Jonesy. But I teach at a company called Empower You. It's personal development skills for teenagers, and we do a whole money and finance section, and we finish on compounding interest. And it's like, it's so powerful when you show them, look, if you invest $400 a month for 45 years, at the end, if you had like a 10% return, at the end you have like, $50 million or whatever. And out of the 50 million, you only put in 240,000.
Yeah.
It's like, but because it's been in the market for so long and it's compounded for so long, you've got this incredible result. And it's just trying to switch them onto that mindset, because I feel like we're grown up. We have the exact opposite mindset. We have, this instant gratification, especially young people. We want it now. We want it now. We want it now.
Yeah, we do. And that's what all the successful marketers out there have really conjured up. It's been great for them getting cashed up from having this instant gratification culture. But if people are able to resist it, and perhaps one of the most powerful forces in our culture is hedonic adaptation, trying to keep up with the Joneses. And if you do that from an early age, and you don't realize that when you're buying something, the latest iPhone or the latest camera or the latest gadget or whatever, there's actually not much difference in utility that you bring into your life whatsoever. You're just spending more money. You're giving more money to someone else. if you can jump off the treadmill and you can live a bit more modestly growing up, just buy a cheap beer rather than the most expensive pints at the pub, whatever it might be. You can hop off that and you can actually use the money and be someone on the other end of the equation and being investing, and you're going to be in a much different space.
And you're speaking from personal experience, aren't you? You mentioned earlier that you were pretty hard partying, you were smoking, doing a lot of party drugs and living that sort of lifestyle. So has reading books and adapting this mindset really been, a game changer for you?
100%. Yeah, well, I feel like it takes, for me anyway, to turn the ship around, it's probably like a 5-year project, 6-year project, I'd say. So it's not easy. I think books early on sell you on the idea that things are easy. They're like a silver bullet books, perhaps the 4-Hour Work Week's one, a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk sort of listening, silver bullet sort of stuff. And you get the feeling like if you do things might happen quick. I think these were really important at the start of my reading journey because it's sort of this carrot that you keep following along. And if you knew how hard it was to actually do something like our podcast, which takes 5 years, or writing a book that was painstaking to put together. If you know what work is involved at the start, you probably wouldn't go ahead on that journey. So I think those silver bullet books at the start was super important to get going, and then over time you realize that things are much more difficult. But I think Tony Robbins, he says, like, you'd be surprised how much you can change in the time frame of 5 or 6 years, but compared to 1 year, I forget the exact quote.
most people underestimate what they can do in 10 years, but overestimate what they can do in 1 year.
That's Love it. You saved me there, Byron.
Yeah,
that's totally true. And I think that was the case for me, probably about 5 or 6 years, I'd say. Yeah,
absolutely. And I did want to comment on what you said there, because having read this book, and I've got a book coming out, which is I'm one of 7 authors, so it's 7 different stories, all linking. It's called 18 and Lost, So Were We, and it's aimed for an 18-year-old, just everyday blokes, people sharing their story. But I know how much work it goes into, and I can't even imagine how much work it went into you guys deciding, number one, which books to put in. Number two, how do we condense a 200-page, a 300-page book into 4 or 5 pages? What's the most important part? And then number 3, putting your own twist in it, so you weren't just copy and pasting their books and writing it in your own words. Like, I can't even imagine. What was that process like for you guys?
Yeah, it was a tough one. That's for
sure. You spelled out the 3 prototypes there in the book. They were literally the 3 iterations of the book, exactly how you
really
there, right?
Yeah, exactly. We started off with pretty dry, sort of boring. We picked our favorite 100 books, and it was a bit of a war to work out. We've got similar tastes. Then there's obviously the core 30 or 40 books we agree on, but then outside of that, there was a few wars to work out the rankings and to work out which ones are in, which ones are out. But then from there, like it was like a weird sort of mix. Like our order from 100 to 1 was pretty meaningless to anybody else. So that's when we thought, okay, let's try to categorize these somehow. That's how we ended up with the 32 different lessons across 9 different parts. The personal development area, the career area, the business area, the marketing area, the personal finance area. We ended up with 9 different areas there. And then from there we thought, well, okay, we've kind of started heading towards this, but it's still a little bit dry and boring. That's when we want to add our own spice to it. We want to add our own stories, our own versions, to make it something that people actually want to read. Not like, I think just like a dry, boring answer. If someone gives you just the answer to the question, it's pretty meaningless. But if someone can sort of take you along on the journey where you uncover the answer for yourself as you go, it's a lot more engaging.
Absolutely. Like wrapping, that's what, so much of my time is spent, how do I wrap this point up in a story? When we're teaching on stage, it's like everything is stories. The growth and fixed mindset, we teach it, we call it above the line and below the line. You're either living above the line where you take accountability, ownership, and responsibility, or you're living below the line where you're blaming others, you're living in denial, and you're making excuses. And the story we use, you've probably heard, is the 2 brothers story. The 2 brothers, one of them, they grew up with an abusive father. Yep. One of them grew up to be successful. The other went to jail. When the journalist asked them the question, why did you turn out the way you did? They both had the same answer. How could I turn out any differently with a father like that? And it's like one had a fixed mindset, one had a growth mindset. And it's just wrapping things in stories when it comes to educating is so important. So important. And you guys have done it so well. Like your stories are funny. they're authentic. You know, you're showing embarrassing parts of your life, and it's really cool.
I think that's it. I think the lesson itself, it's so easy to say, this is the fixed mindset, this is the growth mindset. It's probably 3 sentences. But anyone listening to that, that's not going to stick. That's not going to make any sense to them. There's no context to it. There's no way they can apply it to themselves. They can't see themselves in that. It's not until you give that concrete example of the real world version of it that it actually makes sense to somebody. They can actually understand it, and then they can actually see themselves in it and say, okay, this is how I can actually now take this and do something with it.
And after reading Sapiens, which a lot of people have read, stories were the literally the thing that separated us from the other species of human, or us and the Neanderthals, was our ability to tell stories. And stories aren't just the one you meant, like the ones you mentioned then, or the ones most obvious ones. Money's a story. It's like something that, and perhaps the most powerful story in the world, because people don't believe the same religion, but everyone believes in the value of money. And if you look at a piece of paper, it's not worth anything. It's just the story that everyone believes. So our brain is structured to believe in stories, and we're storytelling animals and everything like that. And the ability to tell stories, to deliver lessons, that's probably what sets apart good nonfiction writers from the rest. The ones who, like you were saying, who just fill it up with a whole bunch of fluff, and it's very hard to actually pick what they're talking about and relate it to the lesson. The ones who do that poorly are probably some of the most boring nonfiction books you can come across. But the ones who do it really well, they're, no surprise, it's going to be your favorite book, are the ones who use stories in the right way.
Whether their information is better or not, that's the key thing. The boring one might have better information, but it's not going to stick, and you're not going to be interested in it. And that's the important part. It's like, that's my whole thing. It's like, you've got a lot of professors or people who are like experts in the field, but they're not good at teaching. And it's like, well, you need to be really good at teaching as well, because you need to deliver the information. And it's like, this whole podcast isn't necessarily about, but a lot of what I talk about is finding that when you finish high school, what do you do? Like, it's such a big question mark, and a big story that I think, you know, especially young Australians believe, is I have to go to university no matter what. Straight out to high school. The story is you finish high school, then you go to university. And I think it's an incorrect story. Like, why not take a year off? Why not figure out who you are before you jump into such a large commitment? Do you guys have experience in that? Like, what did you guys do after high school?
Yeah, I was definitely like that. It was very much the normal path is go to school, work hard, study hard, get good grades, go to university, you know, again, study hard, work hard, get good grades, and then get a good job. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had no clue, in fact. So I just picked what I thought I wanted at the time. I went into physiotherapy. After a semester, I was like, no, don't want to do this. So then I dropped out of that, worked for a bit, then changed and went back and studied commerce and finance. I think for sure, I don't know if I would have got there. Maybe I wasn't mature enough at the time, but I think like even going to uni, even doing commerce and finance, which I sort of thought I wanted to do, but it was just like a tick the box. It was like everyone goes to uni, so I've got to go to uni, so I've got to go and do it. I think now if I actually chose a course that I wanted to do based on my skills, knowledge, experience, aspirations, where I want to go, and if I went back to uni now, I'm sure I'll be so much more engaged. I like literally did the bare minimum to scrape through uni, like, you know, to get those get that 51 and above just to pass and just to get that piece of paper. Whereas now, if I actually did it because I wanted to do it, not because I felt like I had to do it, I'm sure I'd be so much more engaged. I would enjoy it so much more, and I'm sure I'd perform so much better as well.
Well, that's what I talk about. It's like, if you're going to go to uni, you might as well do everything. Join the societies, join all the clubs, get involved as much as you can. And that's where COVID is like ruined university experience for the past 2 years. It's like they just sit at home on their laptops.
Yeah. I love your advice. You were saying, I think one of the best books probably the best book in this area would be Mastery by Robert Greene. And he talks about the apprenticeship. So the apprenticeship being a much, I think, broader way he defines it than people would have at university or your trade apprenticeship or whatever it might be. But it just comes down to understanding what your unique seed of curiosity is, because we've all got this unique DNA on the world. There's part of you that wants to conform, and when you do that, you're going to destroy the unique part of you, whether that's going to university because your parents want you to do it, or just doing things for the purposes of what other people want you to do. And a lot of the most successful people we've come across, they were able to cultivate who they were. The most obvious example that comes up in every business book is Steve Jobs. He was an absolute weirdo going through university. he looks like an absolute drop kick. He stunk. He had bare feet. We're not just saying that people should go out and do this, but there's some things that uniquely are you, and understanding and listening to that, following that, and cultivating that, then the powerful metaphor of a seed is going to grow into something bigger, and eventually, maybe that's where the metaphor stops. It's going to, you know, have some apples you can eat on and munch on and give to everybody else as well.
Yeah, and the apprenticeship is so important. That's what I think we're missing, as well as like, I don't know if you guys relate to this, but in Australia, we don't really have any, like, I guess, cultural initiation from, you know, boyhood to manhood, or, you know, girlhood to womanhood. There is no, it's kind of just like you finish high school, bang, you're straight into it. Whoa. And I know a lot of people will go to uni or like go to work, or, you know, get something just to avoid entering the real world because they're not ready yet. And so this is where, like, I think discovering who you are and reading books can be so beneficial, because it can help open up your mind to a whole new way of thinking and a whole new world, which is, you know, that for me, that was podcasting. When I started listening to podcasts at 16 years old, that opened me up to all these things. And then they said read books. So I started listening to books and reading books. And then, you know, a lot of that helped me get to where I am today.
Yeah. It's like the Lion King. You got, as a kid, child, you might go out and play with Timon and Pumbaa, but when is the time that you step into adulthood? Some people probably never do it, where they actually go back to Pride Rock and take on a Mufasa sort of thing. So I think, yeah, that transition is using the story structure again. It's like, what's the call to adventure that's calling out for someone? It might be traveling the world, a bit hard now. It might be taking on a project, starting a business. It might be all sorts of things, just improving yourself and getting fit. But yeah, but we, as a culture, we don't really have something specific to symbolize this.
Yeah. And that's a project I'm working on, which I think I've spoken to you guys about. I'm sure we can have a chat afterwards. Going back to, I guess, you know, your more book recommendations, keep in mind their age. What are some other, I guess, maybe rapid fire books? I constantly get asked, like, what books do you recommend? If you just want to, like, throw us rapid fire, what are the best books you recommend for, like, young people?
Yeah, I think those ones we mentioned before are good, like general starting entry level type of stuff. I think there's probably a couple like career sort of focused books that are vital to read at the start of your career. Mastery is probably a good one of those. I think So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport is a good one. Focusing on skills, getting good, rather than just like focusing on passion and expecting a good job to come your way. If you want a good job, you actually have to go out there and work hard, develop good skills so that you can actually trade in your skills for a good job. For me personally, something like Range, I think was a good like sort of career book, almost like a philosophical approach to a career. Like, do you want to pick a narrowly defined career to go deep in, or do you want to pick a wide career where you jump from job to job to build a whole bunch of wide different skills? I think another one for young people as well is Grit. You know, it's obviously easy to talk about the importance of building skills, but how do you actually do it? You probably need a bit of grit mixed into that mix to actually work hard to build those skills.
Especially nowadays. I think younger people need more grit more now than ever, because it's so easy to not have any. What about you? What book would you recommend to young people?
So Ashton went down the career route, which should be relevant to, I guess, people who are aspiring entrepreneurs. So pretty broad brush there. If someone's interested in the business route and then bringing their own creation into the world and selling it and making cash, I'd say you can't go past The Lean Startup as something everyone must read, because whatever your first project you're undertaking, it doesn't have to be like you're launching a rocket ship where you're putting all your resources and all your eggs in one basket. You're quitting university. You're doing everything to make this thing work. This is all about finding the bare minimum investment that you can put into it to see and verify a prototype. And from there, you can actually pivot and do the build, measure, learn feedback loop to actually build and change your product and evolve it as you go along. So I think that would have been really helpful for me if that was the first book I read, because I was doing all sorts of stupid stuff as my first business ideas. Learn a lot along the way, but you don't have to invest a hell of a lot to verify something.
I'll add in a different business book. You mentioned 4-Hour Workweek. Obviously, that's great, but it can be a bit long and dry and boring, and maybe some people might get halfway through and give up. I think the Lean Startup, the concept is like a 12 out of 10 as like one of the most important things you need to know in business. But the book, we reread it recently. I found it so boring. And I could understand a young person putting it down because it's like a little bit too technical, a little bit too like manufacturing in a factory type of stuff level. Whereas I think a great probably eye opener for business is The Click Moment by Franz Johansson. I think it probably brings in some of the best ideas from the lean startup in I guess, a bit more digestible way, just about how do you find ideas, test out those ideas, not overcommit, and then from there you can start to build once something starts working.
I like it, Ashton. Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. So scrap lean startup. Click Moment, just because it brings in a whole bunch of great ideas. So lean startup being one. I think another really, really cool idea to learn growing up is just how uncertain the world is. It's inherently uncertain. And if you read another book, The Black Swan, you realize that all the most powerful forces that are happening around the world were previously inconceivable at the time, but retrospectively obvious. Think of what are the most powerful things in the world. Now it's the internet. 20 years ago, no one in the world, you could ask the smartest person, you say, what's going to be the most important force in the next 20 years? No one would have said the internet. It was a black swan. Now it's here. It's retrospectively obvious. Same goes for your personal life. The most powerful thing that's going to influence your life is probably something you can't imagine right now. It might be a meeting you have in 3 years' time. You're having a coffee and you meet someone, the barista whose dad's the CEO of some startup that you're interested in, then bang, you've all of a sudden got this new opportunity. So it's understanding the whole world's uncertain and how the hell can you tap into that uncertainty to get the best from it. And that's by making purposeful bets. So a bet might be a prototype using the lean startup model. A bet tapping in the uncertainty might be going to a networking event and staying around for an extra 6 beers, an extra cocktail, and chatting with everyone with a big smile after you've read How to Win Friends and Influence People. So yeah, the click moment does have a whole a broader banner, which I think is really useful for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I think it's another part of, in my life at least, has just been saying yes to things. Is like just being open to every opportunity. Like I talk about this concept my mate came up with called the 1,000 doors concept. And if you see every person as a door, there are potential 1,000 doors behind them, as in opportunities. And so it's like, who knows what doors are going to happen because you sent me this book. Already, we've had a few doors. You've come on my podcast. I might come on yours. I'm going to talk about these other things. Who knows what's going to expand from that? There could be 1,000 doors just from one email you sent me. And that's that. He's actually writing a book on that. That expands out massively. But I just believe just saying yes to things. It's like that Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man. It's like just be open to opportunities, especially while you're young, because the consequences are so low. Like if you say yes to an opportunity and it fails, like who cares? You don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage or anything. It's like, who cares?
I love that. There's a book we read, Algorithms to Live By. It uses this like a computer science analogy where it says explore and exploit. So at the start, just go out there and explore things, say yes to everything. Later down the track, there might be to the point where you've found your thing, and then the strategy might turn to no later down the track. But yeah, definitely at the very start, just exploring, saying yes to everything, and being open and just having an open mind. And later down the track, your strategy might be better turning it into a no. But if you haven't found anything, throwing everything against the wall, seeing what sticks and just exploring could be the best strategy.
Yeah, great. I did want to switch gears. We've spoken about a few books. Do you guys read many biographies? Like, what are your thoughts on biographies? Do you think they're quite valuable to read?
I previously hadn't, and then I read the Steve Jobs one, which I thought was great. I wasn't really looking forward to it because it was like 700, 800 pages or something massive, and I thought I sort of knew a lot of the Steve Jobs story because I'd watched a couple of the movies about Steve Jobs, but I really liked it. I think it was probably just well written. There's a lot to learn, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I wouldn't have learnt otherwise. I also really enjoyed reading, not really a biography, but The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis, the guy who wrote The Big Short and Moneyball and stuff. And it was sort of like a biography of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, talking about how they discovered or created this new field of behavioral economics, and blending sort of psychology with economics and working out how people actually act and how our brains are kind of screwed up and we do the wrong things all the time. So I really enjoyed reading that as well, even though there wasn't super clear lessons that you can apply straight away, like an quote unquote normal sort of nonfiction book that might have the 7 habits or the 6 steps to do ABC. Sort of the direct lessons were a little bit hidden, but I did enjoy them. I wouldn't say that I read them a lot, and I wouldn't switch out to just reading those all the time, but there's definitely merit to it.
What about you, Jonesy?
Yeah, I'm in the same basket. I'd say 1 out of every 10 or 15 is a biography. First 100 books, probably didn't read any. But yeah, Steve Jobs, I think it's a bit different what you learn from reading a biography. If it's a good author, like it is with Walter Isaacson, you feel like you kind of understand Steve Jobs' brain a little bit more than, or a lot more than someone else writes about him in a business book. So yeah, I think like his appreciation for design sort of thing. Like I never probably appreciated design whatsoever, but that's probably what I learned through the book. I can't articulate exactly, this is how you do a good design. I just probably appreciate it just because you could see the obsession Steve Jobs had with this one specific thing. So yeah, something probably over time we'll start to read a lot more of. Plus, it's probably a little bit more difficult for us to translate a biography into a podcast episode as well, which is probably another one of the reasons we don't do it as much.
Because I've read only a handful, but the ones I've read have been really amazing. And I think it's very, very different because you're right. There's no like tangible, like here are the 7 habits. Here's the formula to break a habit or make a new habit, right? But I do think for me, you get a lot of like perspective out of it, and you learn a lot about work ethic. Like if you haven't, I'd recommend Shoe Dog, which is the Nike book. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. You talk about how to start a business in the 50s. He had to fly to Japan just for like one meeting, and then he had to fly all the way back. And all their wives were working part-time as bookkeepers. Now we pay a software to do that for us for like $30 a month, and it's just insane. And the same with Elon Musk's book, which is if you ever want to feel insignificant as a human, read that book. Like, man, it is insane. And so for me, I found them quite valuable because number one, I find them easier to read because you're following like a long story. And number two, I do think, it's a good mix to add in there. But you do almost have to take the lessons out from your own perspective. Like they're not going to force them down your throat. You've got to find the lessons yourself.
Definitely.
Well, the Elon Musk one, I think, you don't, it's not obvious what you learn until afterwards, but like if you think you're busy, if you complain about your week being busy with whatever you're doing with work, go and read that book and you put yourself in perspective how busy you are compared to him, especially I think it was 2008 where he had Tesla was stuffing up, SpaceX was in trouble, he just had his kids, he had a divorce, all these things, the amount of time, the amount of things a human being can do in the week. And remember, we're the same species as Elon Musk, so in a sense,
maybe
apparently
it could be a lizard or a robot or something. But
a reptile.
Our show's been roped into the YouTube algorithms recently. Bohemian.
No, but that's it. And I remember there was a point where he took a holiday in Australia. Actually, he took a holiday in Australia for the first time, and as soon as he landed, he found out Tesla was kicking him out of the board, and he flew straight back. And I'm just like, like it's just like I don't want that lifestyle, no way. But like I respect how it's exactly as you say. It's perspective. Going, I'm not that busy. I'm just putting it into perspective, which has its downsides because you shouldn't always be comparing yourself to the most elite people in the world. But I think it does add a good perspective.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. In one sense, it can be dangerous if you're always peaking up. If you're only getting access to the toppest dogs in the world, then you might feel insignificant, which I guess has its good effects of playing down your ego. If you think you're a big dog, you're probably not. But also has a negative of just peer envy and you not having the same resources as other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's why your book's really great because, you guys are quote unquote everyday guys. You're not, massive CEOs and multimillionaires who are writing a book, which is majority of the personal development books. They're mostly hyper successful people. And I think there's weight to having everyday people, write a book. That's why, the book I've got coming out is, 8 everyday people, just like anyone else, sharing what they wish they knew. And there's tips. I also think the downside of it can be they're so far, like a 20-year-old listening to a massive CEO, there's such a big disconnect there.
Yeah,
it's like they're so far out of reach. It's almost like, man, am I ever going to get there? Whereas someone who's 22 writing a book for an 18-year-old. It's like, I was in your shoes 4 years ago. I know what you're going through. You know, 50-year-old has no idea what a 22-year-old's going through nowadays, or an 18-year-old. The world's so different.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's a vital point. Like being like a step ahead, but not being like at the top of the mountain trying to speak to the people at the bottom. Like there's no way that like how could you even relate? Like how could you even relate the 30-year business career where you're the top of the top, and then you're trying to teach people who are at the start of their journey? I think the things that are important to you at the top of the mountain are totally different and totally insignificant to someone who's just starting out to climb from the bottom. Compare that to someone who's maybe 10% of the way up the mountain, who's looking up to the person at the top and learning from them, and then trying to pass the lessons down and just saying, here's like your next batch of hurdles. It's not like your hurdles near the top, but the hurdles that you're about to hit. There's definitely a lot of value in that for sure.
Which is a strategy. One of my mates, when we were talking about uni, he got a scholarship at Sydney University and he did everything. He's crushing it. One of the things he does is he learns more from the students a year or two ahead of him than he does from the teachers. So he's like befriended them, and they like tutor him and they give him his notes and stuff. And he learns way more from them than he does from the the professor with 30 years experience. And it's like for exactly that reason, I believe.
I think it's just like probably the things, if you've been doing it, if you've been teaching that same class every year for 30 years, it seems so obvious to you. Compare that to someone who's just learnt it for the first time, who's gone from like a 0 understanding to a 60% understanding. At least they know what those first things are, the first most important, most tricky to understand concepts that just seem obvious to someone who already knows it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the point. But I mean, before we wrap it up, I'd love to ask a question to both of you and we can answer in turns. Basically, what would your number one piece of advice be to the younger generation? If you're talking to an 18-year-old now, what advice would you give them?
We've covered the ground a little bit, but I'll probably just go back to cultivating your unique seed. It's going to be difficult to not do things just for what everyone else wants you to do. So there's a balance of that, but also avoiding instant gratification. So it doesn't mean go out there and go, oh yeah, I feel like just traveling the world and just spending all my money and partying on weekends because that feels like my unique seed wants me to do. So it's trying to find that balance of, I'd probably, when I was 18, I'd probably hear that advice and go, yeah, I want to go out and party. That feels like my unique seed.
That's my passion.
That's my passion. It's a lot of fun. But so finding that balance, but also, not instant gratification, getting the benefits of the compound effect. It's a very nuanced question. I think if people deep down in their heart, they might know what the answer is to that and having it as a bit of a guide. But yeah, in any case, it's probably stepping on the path of growth, just doing difficult things, not living a comfortable life, having some kind of rough idea that there is a clock ticking really on your life and not living in regret. So at the very end of your life, looking back and having that as your decision filter to what you're deciding today. And for a lot of people, it might mean go out there and try different things, go out there, fail, and you're going to grow for it and be better off in the long term.
Nice. Absolutely. And before we get to Ashto, if you could only have one book for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
That's for you.
Sorry, is that for me? I thought it was.
Sorry, did I say the wrong?
No. He said before he gets to Ashto. Yeah.
Before he gets to Ashto. Sorry.
Okay.
That's a great question. Okay, one book. I'd say I'm going to go with Laws of Human Nature. We haven't spoken about that yet. It's so dense. It's a big book, so there's a lot packed into it, and it covers the very light side of human nature, but also the other side as well. Now, I think that you can probably just see yourself for who you really are as a human. A lot of the things we kind of pass off unconsciously. It's hard to look at our weaknesses, but after reading that, you're going to uncover all sorts of flaws that you're going to have and things you can work on for a lifetime.
Love it. Okay, now over to you, Ashto. What advice would you give to an 18-year-old?
I think the advice of intentionality, of aiming at a target and then trying to hit that target. Obviously, your first couple of shots, say if it's you're lining up for what's a better analogy, archery or darts? We'll go with archery. There seems to be a little bit more technique to it than darts. The first couple of arrows that you shoot you're aiming for that target, probably going to miss by heaps. But through a few iterations, by like working out how far to pull the string back, how which direction, what small tweaks in your aim can improve, every shot that you take is going to get you closer to that goal. Of course, if you're just shooting the arrow for the sake of shooting it, there's no learnings there. You don't know how far you've missed by. You don't know what you're aiming for. You don't know how to get closer to those goals. So I think by picking a goal, by picking something that you want to do and aiming for it and starting to take steps to work towards it, you're going to have a hell of a lot of learnings. You might realize that you picked the wrong goal. For me, my goal was to, become a physiotherapist. If I had have, just kept thinking about it or kept, maybe for me, if I did take a gap year and then I went and started physiotherapy, I might have missed it entirely. But by actually doing it, by taking steps towards it, I realized that goal was completely wrong. And then I could actually change and start shooting at a different target. And it's not until that you actually start taking those shots that you know if the target's correct in the first place. And then secondly, you can actually start getting closer to hitting that bullseye.
And I think today, so many young people aren't taking any shots out of the fear of failing. And it's like, well, you can't, the only way to not fail is to not try.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to try, what's the point? So it's a great analogy. Like, just keep taking shots and know that every time you take a shot, you're going to get better and you're going to get closer to that thing. And a shot could represent an opportunity or getting out of your comfort zone or whatever it is. And the other cool thing you said there is like, be okay to pivot. It's like, yeah, you picked physio. Yeah, that cost you $15,000 in hex and a year of your life. Move on. It's like, don't stick with it if you're not enjoying it. Pivot to something else and, figure out, shoot another arrow or whatever.
Yeah.
And understand it's difficult to figure that stuff out. Like, you're probably not going to pick it right on the first try. That's okay.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
And so what book would you choose if you could only read one book for the rest of your life?
I'd probably go Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a philosophy book. It's a book that if I had have been given it in high school and they said, hey, here's a book that you have to read, I would have absolutely hated it. I wouldn't have understood it. I would have tried to look up the cheat notes online to try to pass the test. But because I guess chose to read it, and it's just like it's a whole bunch of really short, like 1 to 2 sentence ideas, really, just built up. There's no story to it. It's just like the guy's thoughts. He was like a Roman philosopher king from 2,000 years ago. But just some of the things that he was facing, we can see those same situations in our own lives. Even though they're totally different, they're 2,000 years removed, the same sort of core ideas come up over and over and over. And I'm sure that, say, if I read that book once a year, every year, different sections would stand out to me, and I would apply it differently to my own life at that same time. So whilst it's probably not something that I would have picked as an 18-year-old, it's something that I reckon I could read every single year.
Yeah, amazing. I'm a big fan of Marcus Aurelius. Actually, there's that question I've been asked a few times, like if you could speak with anyone dead or alive, like any 3 people dead or alive, I reckon he'd be one of them. Like nice. Finding out his perspective from 2,000 years ago, because it's interesting, like how much has the world changed in 2,000 years? Like the stuff we do is considered magic or like godly to what he would have seen, yet we still have the same struggles and the same thoughts and the same stuff is going on.
Yeah, definitely.
It's bizarre. It's an interesting life being a Homo sapien. And yeah, if it's 2,000 years old, the book, or however old it is, it just adds more weight to it because it's stood the test of time. And that's obviously the truth, because it's still the same, eh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, same with How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's how old is that? Over 100 years, I think.
Yeah, I think it was like the 1930s, so it's getting close to 100 years. And
yeah, it's almost 100.
If people are it's obviously it's not like, how do you get the most out of Facebook advertising, or how to anything that's like relevant right now that seems cutting edge and like a hot trend is probably going to be dead soon. Whereas something that's 100 years old, which is communicating with people, or something that's 2,000 years old, like understanding what you can control and what you can't control, then that's sort of like the core essence, the things that we're going to always be facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ashton and Jonesy, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. For anyone who wants to get a copy of your book or listen to your podcast, follow you online, where's the best place to go?
So for everyone listening, probably our podcast. If they're listening in an audio format, our podcast will be on the same platform. Scroll through the books. A few are going to jump out. at you, and then click on anything that jumps out. We've got a huge catalogues of books that you can tap into. And of course, our book, The Shit They Never Taught You, we've got 115 of the best books that we've come across. So we've read 300 of them. We've spent, 20 grand or something on our bookshelf back there, and the amount of time it takes for a whole university degree in putting all the best stuff into one single volume. So that book can be found on online, so Amazon, Dimmix, Book Depository, or wherever you like to buy your books online.
Yeah, and I'll put all the links below. Highly recommend getting a copy. Like, it's honestly, it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's like the Bible for personal development. Like, you can kind of just take it, and it's just got
that.
Yeah, there you go. It's got everything you need, and might not be in it, a huge amount of detail, but it's got enough to get you going. So I think it's a great book for young people. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show, and looking forward to working together in the future.
Cheers, legend. It was great to chat.
That was an absolute pleasure, mate.